Good afternoon, I'm Faye Barker. India's deadliest train disaster in decades, in which nearly 300 people were killed, has today been blamed on a signal failure. An investigation into how a train was sent onto the wrong track suggests it was caused by an error in the electronic signals, leading to 3 trains colliding in the eastern Indian state of Odisha. Our Asia correspondent Debbie Edward has the latest.
By this morning, the train tracks had been cleared and the rescue operation declared over. There were no more survivors, only bodies recovered overnight from the mangled carriages which lie stacked in a ditch. The intensive care unit at this hospital has been overwhelmed with critical patients. Hundreds have arrived, many with life-changing injuries. These 4 friends were on their way to Chennai to find work. Mukesh Pandit got trapped in the overhead luggage rack and believes that saved his life.
आदमी सीट पे फुल था, नीचे भी बैठा था, पैर हिलाने का जगह ट्रेन में नहीं था, इतना ही भीड़ था कि बाकी कोई आदमी को नहीं मिला। 4 आदमी जो हम लोग थे ये हैं और 2 आदमी जो बगल में और बैठा था वही नजर आया, बाकी कोई आदमी नहीं दिखाया।
The Railways Minister has confirmed the crash was caused by a signalling failure. It sent the Coromandel Express onto the wrong track, leading it to smash into a stationary goods train at full speed. Another commuter service coming from the opposite direction then ploughed into the wreckage. The horror of this crash is borne out by the pictures on this table. Almost 300 families received a call to identify their relatives at the morgue. They queued to match images of their loved ones in life with an official photo taken of them in death. What a truly devastating process to endure. This man came to collect his nephew's body, but says it's so chaotic they haven't been able to find him yet. The government was due to launch a new high-speed rail service this weekend. It has pledged to improve India's railways, which serve 13 million people every day. But instead of speed, passengers are again calling for greater safety as the country comes to terms with its worst rail disaster this century. Debbie Edward, ITV News.
Here, the row over Boris Johnson's pandemic WhatsApp messages shows no signs of going away this lunchtime. A senior minister says the former PM will not be restricted over what he can tell the COVID inquiry, despite being warned he could lose public funding for legal advice if he undermines the government. Well, I'm joined by our political correspondent, David Wood. So, David, what's the latest twist now in this ongoing row?
You're right, this saga seems no closer to any resolution. This all cruxes around the COVID inquiry's demand for WhatsApps, unredacted WhatsApps from Boris Johnson, other senior ministers and officials. Now, the government is challenging that in court, saying that it should be able to redact certain parts of those messages before handing them over, things that aren't relevant to COVID. An example today about stuff that might relate to the private life of civil servants. But Boris Johnson has since said, well, he'll hand over all of his stuff directly to the inquiry himself, if necessary. And that's where this threat to remove the legal funding for him comes in. The immigration minister told me earlier it's not about restricting what Boris Johnson can say, but that if the taxpayers are paying for his legal bills, he should be following the government advice.
The former Prime Minister is at liberty to hand over whatever documents he wants to the inquiry. What we have said is that as he's being represented by lawyers paid for by the taxpayer, that needs to be done appropriately, as you'd expect when you're using public funds. On the broader issue, we've said that we will hand over to Lady Justice Hallett absolutely anything related to COVID and the pandemic.
Now, there are murmurings on the backbenches, though, that this whole row is about trying to save Rishi Sunak having to hand over certain messages. There's been criticism of his Eat Out to Help Out scheme. Remember, in the summer of 2020, to get people back to restaurants, there were discounts there. Some scientists say that saw a spike in COVID cases. There's also suggestions amongst some of Boris Johnson's allies that releasing all WhatsApps could show attempts to oust and plots to oust Boris Johnson. Now, the government says that is not the case at all. It hopes this will be resolved fairly quickly, but I think at the current state, a quick resolution isn't likely at all.
OK, it doesn't seem like the way, does it, David? Thank you. Well, the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, we saw there, also said this morning that migration targets are not particularly helpful. That's despite previous Tory promises to keep figures below 100,000 a year. Net migration to the UK last year is estimated to have reached a record 606,000. Mr. Jenrick also claimed the asylum system is riddled with abuse and needs fundamental changes. Ambulance workers have been violently attacked thousands of times while on duty, according to the GMB union. In the last 5 years, an investigation found around 9,500 incidents where crews had been hit with weapons, bitten and spat at. Over 10% of the incidents were sexual assaults. And the King is to give up his home in Wales on the edge of Bannau Brycheiniog. The 192-acre estate in Carmarthenshire was bought for £1.2 million by the Duchy of Cornwall estate on behalf of the then Prince in 2007. Well, King Charles, who's currently on holiday in Romania, is reported to be giving up the property because it's unlikely he'll use it in the same way as before. Finally, 10 acts will be battling it out tonight, hoping to win the final of Britain's Got Talent. Among the favourites are Musa Motar, a South African dancer who had one of his legs removed as a child after being diagnosed with bone cancer. Well, that's it for now. We'll have more at 6:10. Until then, have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.